When I was in college, my least favorite class was the one right after lunch, no matter what that class was, because there's something about the Sandman. That's when he is the most active. But Dr. Thrash taught me a way to keep from falling asleep during a lecture or driving down the road. She always knew when I was tired when I was driving. And she'd say, "Brother Don, you're tired, aren't you?" And you know what she saw? If you don't want to fall asleep while you're sitting there, just lift one foot off the floor. As long as your foot is off the floor, you cannot fall asleep. But after a while, the law of gravity is going to take over. It's amazing how heavy that leg will get, and it's going to start creeping down. Then it's going to crash to earth. You bring the other one up. And when it gets tired, you pedal your way all the way through class. And she would look up and she'd see I'm driving down the road with my left foot in the air. She says, "Brother Don, you're tired, aren't you?" Because I did not want to fall asleep while I was driving down the road. So let's just pray that you stay awake. The people who, had reasons not to be here this afternoon, they're going to miss a lot of really good information. I'm going to repeat some of the things I said last night because, some of you weren't here last night, and I think they're very important. But I want to start with a question. What time is it? 2 o'clock? Okay, well, it's 2 o'clock there, that's true. But that's not the time we're talking about. One day closer to the time of Christ's coming. But it's not about hours and minutes and seconds. Let's define what time is. Okay? I heard this many years ago. I was in church in Belvedere Church in Atlanta, Georgia. And this guy was giving a talk, and he defined what time was, and I've never forgotten it. Neither will you. He said, basically, time is a portion of eternity that God has set aside for a purpose, very special purpose. You know what that purpose is? To solve the problem of sin. Because when Adam was created, did he have an expiration date? No, he had no expiration date. There was no time. He was not going to have birthdays. It was just going to go on forever. When did time begin? At the fall. Exactly. That's when it began. When will time end? Not the second coming. There's 1,000 years after that. And then there's some time after that. It's going to end at the final fire. When the universe will be cleansed, and all that floating space junk is going to be gone, and all the sin down here is going to be gone, that's when time is over. But between those two is where we are right now. Now, I believe we're very, very near the end of the 6,000 years, and we need to be getting ready for that. Is it sometimes tough to go through this life? Did you have any hard times this past week? We had a saying in the Marine Corps, probably in the Army too, the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. We're just in training right now. All the things you think are so monumental are nothing compared to what's getting ready to happen. And we need to start getting ourselves ready right now. Do you recognize this place? Does anyone recognize it? According to my computer, that's downtown Boise. It may not be, but that's what my computer says. Those buildings there, or buildings anywhere, this building here, what's the most important part of those buildings? The foundation. That's the most important part. But there's one building in the world that's famous for its pitiful foundation. Which one's that? That's the Leaning Tower of Pisa. Now, they began building that thing in 1173. They completed it in 1350. Now, the question, when did it start to lean? Any ideas? 1178. 5 years after it began building, it started to lean because they built it over a sand pit. and their foundation was only 9 feet thick. Not enough for that. It took him that long to build it because he kept having to adjust things to keep enough weight from toppling that thing over. We are building foundations, especially the young people. They're building foundations. Are these children laying a good foundation? Look at the picture. What are they eating? Looks like they're getting a good broad range of antioxidant foods, the beautiful colors. How about this child right here? Is this one getting a good foundation? Terrible foundation. And that child will suffer its entire life because of the poor foundation that's being laid for it right now. And it's something about living your whole life. How long does it take to live a lifetime? Those of you who are in my age group or above or not far below, how long did it take to get here? A blink of an eye. It takes no time at all to go from looking like that to looking like this right here. It goes so fast. Now, the nice thing is we can continue to build our foundations right now. We can change. We can start living right. And I've got so many stories I could tell you about that. But I want to show you one of my favorite athletes. His name was Carl Lewis. How many remember Carl Lewis? Was he great? He was fantastic. He won 9 Olympic gold medals, 1 Olympic silver medal. But he started laying a good foundation when he was very young because he became a vegan. It's amazing how many great athletes are vegans. Venus and Serena Williams are vegans. Now, let me clarify this. I'm not a vegan. You know how I know I'm not a vegan? I'm wearing a leather belt. Vegans don't. I'm a whole food, plant-based vegetarian. We got to be careful with our terms. I was with Dr. Agatha Thrash at Bucknell University one time at a vegetarian conference. There was a room that we had booths. People were selling stuff. I was selling books, and across from my booth was Feminist for Animal Rights. Now, I'm all for animal rights. That's fine. But one day, this lady working the booth, she's great. She walked up to me, and I look up, and she's looking down, and she says, "Real vegans don't wear leather." And I says, "It was a roadkill. Don't worry about that." And do you think Carl Lewis took care of his body? Do you think he was careful about exercising? Do you think he did a good job of taking care of his body through what he put into his body and what he did with his body? Very, very much so. Should we be any less serious about ours? Here's what it says. We looked at this verse last night. You coming up here? Okay, 1 Corinthians 6:19. Remember we read that. What? Know you not that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit which is in you, and you are not your own. You are bought with a price. Now, back in Christ's day, back in Greek days, when somebody won a race, what did they give them for winning the race? Yes, a laurel wreath around their head. And Paul talks about this. He says, whoops, go back. Okay, I missed it. They get a corruptible crown, but we, an incorruptible crown. We're in the competition right now. And Paul uses the illusion of sports and getting ready for the big race for Christians. And we are getting ready for the big race. But the problem is, many of us have Babylonian minds that we got to get rid of our Babylonian minds. A patient came to Uchee Pines, 91. She was taking 32 medications a day. I've seen them take more than this. And I thought this was extreme. When she came to Uchee Pines, she walked like this. Everything hurt. When they come, they fill out a form. What are your goals for being at Uchee Pines? Her goal was, I just want to live again. I looked at her list of presenting problems. She had a long list. She had insomnia, pain, arthritis. She just had this long list. Then I had this long list of medications. So I took the medications and her symptoms, and I made a chart. I went back to the medical library, and one of her problems was she had high blood pressure. So what do the doctors do for high blood pressure? Gave her medication. Well, I looked in the PDR, the physician's desk reference, at the main side effects of that medication. You know what I found? One of her medications caused her to be drowsy. So now she's complaining about drowsy. What do the doctors do for drowsy? They gave her medication, but I looked up its major side effect and found out that that one makes you agitated. So I looked up the medication that they gave her for the agitation and found out that that caused nausea, and it goes on. You see what was happening here? Why was she taking so many medications? Side effects of medications. In one day, she went from 32 medications to 4 medications. Now, you can't stop all medications. You can't stop blood pressure medications. You might rebound. The body's got to adjust to that thing, and it's going to do bad things. Got down to 4. Changed her lifestyle. When she left, 3 weeks later, she was completely well. No medications, no pain, no problems. Now, she was on the mountaintop. Have you ever been on the mountaintop with God? What does Satan want you to do? Go back down in the valley. She was so anxious to get home, so she drove back down to Florida. She couldn't wait to show her husband her new self. She busts into the house. Honey, where are you? Looking over the house, and she finds a note on the kitchen table. I'm sorry to tell you this, but I have left you for another man. That's insult to injury. She had a choice at that point. She could go back into the valley or stay in the mountaintop. She stayed on the mountaintop. Folks, when Satan tries to kick you down into the valley, just say, get thou behind me, Satan. God has done too many good things. And he's done too many good things for every one of you to ever want to get back down in that slough of despond again, as Bunyan said it. We talk about Babylonian mines. Babylonian mines are everywhere. Here I am in Kaduppa, India. That's me with the beard. That's back in my bearded days. I'm in Kaduppa, India, and don't even think about HIPAA. Those of you who are nurses, no such thing as HIPAA. All those people around there are the next patients. I'm sitting at a table with my translator and a patient. They tell me their problem. Everyone hears the problem. I tell them the solution. Everyone hears the solution. So what I would do is I'd been there, and that's a little bit too soon to say that, but I would say, okay, here's what you do. Do this, and this, 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 and this. Now, have any of you ever been to India? Have anyone ever seen an Indian, Indian from India, say yes? What do they do when they say yes? Mr. Bobblehead, which always makes me dizzy when I do it. So they'd get this big smile, eyes wide, tablets. I say, I didn't mention tablets. I said, do this, 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 and this. Tablets. So I had to go out to Ayurvedic shops and English chemist shops, they call drugstores, and buy simple vitamins in blister packs. C, B complex, whatever I could find. And then I would cut them into strips and tape them together, and I put them in a box underneath my table. And then they'd come and say, they tell me their problem, I tell them, do these natural things. And then I would reach under the table and I'd bring out this long strip. It'd be a long strip of these wonderful miracle tablets. And say, and take one of these every day with 8 glasses of water. Now, nothing else, they're going to get rehydrated, they're going to get a good flush going on, and they're going to do probably the other 5 things. They'll give all the credit to the simple vitamin I gave them, but at least I got through the Babylonian mind to do something. I mentioned this last night. Have high cholesterol? Not a problem. What do people do if they have high cholesterol with Babylonian minds? They take a statin drug. All right? Remember, we talked about this last night. You take the statin drug, the risk of getting diabetes goes up 48 to 71% by taking the statin drugs for high cholesterol. So what do we do for high cholesterol? Quit putting it in your body and take high fiber foods, what's going to help take it out of your body. Craziness. But now the person has got diabetes and high cholesterol, so now what are they going to do for their diabetes? They're going to get into some rigorous sugar control through medications. Well, here's what they say about that. If you have diabetes, yeah, not a problem. Just take a sugar-lowering drug. But now we find that, this is from the New England Journal of Medicine. Is that considered a highly credible source? Very highly credible. This is one of the major health journals in America. Diabetes medication will kill you faster than diabetes. In the study they did, you increased your risk of dying 20% by taking sugar-lowering drugs. Diabetes, as I mentioned last night, is one of the easiest diseases to work with. Type 2 diabetes. Crazy. All right, now, lifespan isn't the most important thing. How many of you want to live longer? Yeah, some people don't want to live longer, but lifespan's not the most important thing. You've got a thing called mortality. That's how long you're going to live. But we can also call that quantity of life. Now, can any of you do what this is not Photoshop. I've got the whole picture. There's a man standing in front of her talking to her. She is actually doing that on parallel bars. She's buff. She's doing a good job. She's got good quantity of life. Now, this one also has quantity of life. We call that morbidity. She's not in very good shape. See, this is where you have a lack of quality of life. And many people have this problem. They're lacking the quality. Let's look at life expectancy. Now, I've got ages from a couple of years past. As a matter of fact, you realize that the lifespan of men and women have fallen in the last 3 years? Not just because of COVID. We're just not a healthy bunch of people. So, in mortality, okay, fine. In 2017, the average lifespan of a man was 76.1 years. Okay? The average lifespan of a woman was 81.1 years. Women always live longer than men. Men are bigger risk takers, and there's other factors involved there. That's their lifespan. But now we have another thing called morbidity or healthy life expectancy. For the same people, what is a healthy life expectancy? For 2017, 76.1 is their life expectancy. Their healthy life expectancy is 70.4, which means for 5.7 years, they're suffering from at least one, usually 3 chronic conditions. Quality is gone. One thing in common with all these diseases they're going to have, they're lifestyle diseases, which means it's what we're putting in our bodies and what we're doing with our bodies. For women, 67.7 years. That's 13.4 years of some morbidity that's causing the quality to go out the window. And some of you are suffering from that right now. The nice thing is, it doesn't have to stay that way. God has a plan to recover you. I would that thou art prosper, be in health, even as thy soul prospers, he says. Exodus 15:26. Is there anyone that says Exodus 15:26? If thou wilt diligently hearken unto the voice of the Lord your God, do that which is right in his sight, keep all of his commandments and keep all of his statutes, I will lay what? None of these diseases upon you which I brought upon the Egyptians. How's the verse end? For I am the Lord that heals you. So that tells me we can either not get it, or if we get it, he can still heal us. And I think I've got this on a future slide here, but we'll have to see it twice. What is the best treatment for any disease? All right, finding the cause, that's good. Here's what I tell them. Whatever the disease is, go back and start practicing what you should have done to prevent the disease. It's not different. If you don't want to get heart disease, eat a healthy diet, get your exercise, sunshine, vitamin D, do all these good things, and you won't get it. If you get heart disease, start doing those things that would have kept you from getting it in the first place. Diseases are reversible. Now, I'm not talking about heart disease now, but I'll just mention a story. Dr. Christian Barnard. How many remember the name Dr. Christian Barnard? Okay, we've got a few people. What was he famous for? First human heart transplants. South Africa, back in the early 60s. First patient didn't make it too well, but I think his second or third patient was a dentist. And a young person, or another person had an accident. They took the person's heart, put it in him, and it worked fine. They took his diseased heart out, put this young heart in there, and he was up and around in a day. Everything is fine. And Dr. Barnard says, it worked, go home and enjoy your life. Wrong words. Because he had a Babylonian mind, and enjoy your life. Down in South Africa, we call it barbecue, they call it a braai. He went back to his braai, his grilled meat and all that stuff. 19 months later, he died of a massive heart attack. And they took the heart out and it looked just like the first heart. Didn't take long to kill that second heart. How many have ever heard of a man by the name of Nathan Pritikin? All right, he was Seventh-day Adventist. He started this, when he was in his, I think it was 40s. This is back in 1956. He was diagnosed with heart disease. You're not going to survive. It is terminal. You've only got a few months to live. At that point, he had two choices. What are his two choices? One, go home and get ready to die. Make sure the will's filled out and do whatever makes you happy. Second thing is, find out how to fight this thing. So he went to the library. This is back before Google search. How many old folks, the library with the index of current literature, going through the cards and pulling out. He was looking for the country in the world that had the lowest rate of heart disease. In 1956, it was Uganda. So he adopted their lifestyle. 10% fat, 10% protein, 80% carbohydrates. And by 1959, his cholesterol had gone from up in the multiple hundreds down to about, I think, 180. A year later, his cholesterol was down to 120, and he had a perfect heart checkup. Everything was fine. He was running 6 kilometers a day, 3.5 miles a day. Everything was fine. Heart disease is completely reversible. But in order to reverse the heart disease, you got to reverse the lifestyle. And for too many people, that's too big of a cross to carry. Folks, we've all got a cross. For some people, it's diet. For some people, it's dress. For some people, it's exercise. We've all got a cross, and we got to carry the cross. And the nice thing is, once you've achieved your victory, it's no longer a cross. You're surfing the crest of the wave now. You turn that cross into a surfboard. In medical science, how many diseases have been named, have been identified? Any idea? Well, you're not going to guess this one. It's about 100,000 different diseases. Now, you go to the doctor and say, can you list 1,000 diseases? They probably won't be able to get it out very easily, unless they mention all 300 types of cancers and goes on from there. But 100,000 different diseases in the world. You can't study that many. How many types of perfect health are there? One. Now, what should we be studying then? The problem or the solution? If we have perfect health, we should expect that God's promise in Exodus 15:26 is sure we're not going to get sick. But if we do get sick, it's because we did something wrong or something in our environment went wrong. I've got a picture somewhere on my computer, I'm not going to show it to you, of the sky completely laced with chemtrails. You get chemtrails here in Idaho? Okay. Sister White says at the end of time, the air will be filled with a deadly taint. I wonder if that's what she was thinking about. What if God was giving her a little peek at the sky with all that aluminum they're putting up there to reflect the sun rays back up there, and all that aluminum's coming down here, and aluminum's not good for you, especially for your brain. Lord Palmerston, he was the Premier of England back in the 1840s and 1850s. He received a letter from clergymen up in Scotland. They said, please declare a day of prayer and fasting because we've got a cholera epidemic going on up here in Scotland. Does that sound like a good idea? Prayer and fasting? It's a great idea. Palmerston was brilliant. Listen to what he wrote back. Cleanse and disinfect your streets and houses. Next thing, promote cleanliness and health among the poor. This was England in the 1840s, 1850s. Very nasty place. See that they are plentifully supplied with good food and raiment, and employ right sanitation measures generally. What's he looking at here? What's he doing? What causes cholera? Unclean conditions. He's saying remove the cause. But now, the last two things he says are absolutely brilliant. He says, come on, and you will have no occasion to fast and pray. Why? Because you solved the problem. But the last thing he says is even more serious. We've got to think about this. Nor will the Lord hear your prayers while these, his preventives, remain unheeded. Sanctified Life, page, I think, 29. That's where Sister White quotes this story. That's where I got it. Sanctified Life, I think page 29 to 39. He was way ahead of his time, and we're way behind where he was. We've got to remove the causes. All right, last night we talked about the basic foundation principle of health. Does anyone remember what the foundation was? You didn't see the picture because I didn't have any pictures last night. Reason from cause to effect. That's what Lord Palmerston was talking about. That's what we're talking about. Last night we talked about disease and the effort of nature. We did all that. On top of the foundation, there's three golden pillars. We talked about those last night. The first golden pillar was the life is in the blood. Where does your blood come from? Things you put into your body. We just had a nice lunch, right? You got good blood circulating right now. Whatever you ate is in your bloodstream right now. Let me say an interesting fact. I mentioned last night that Dr. Agatha Thrash died of a stroke. Her husband died of cancer. But this is because of other factors other than lifestyle. We teach phlebotomy. I say we are no longer there, but we teach phlebotomy at Uchee Pines. That means blood draw. And if you ever go to Uchee Pines and you hear that the students are practicing blood draw, don't go down the doctor's wing, because they will snatch you into that room and you'll have needles sticking in both arms because they got to practice. One day Dr. Agatha was going down the hallway and they don't snatch in. Dr. Thrash, can we draw your blood? Yes, you may. She stuck out her arm, put it in there, punctured the vacutainer, and it looked like tomato soup coming into the vacutainer. It's supposed to be red. It was rosy. And she was alarmed. What's the problem? She'd just come back from lunch and this is happening. She, being a pathologist, it took a while to figure it out, but the problem was, for lunch she had had some peanut butter, and that fat was already in her bloodstream. She never touched it again the rest of her life because she overproduced cholesterol, and she didn't need anything else to mess up her circulatory system. Okay, second golden pillar, this was perfect health requires a perfect circulation. Now, there's ways to get good circulation. We can get some exercise. If you can't get exercise, you can get what we call passive exercise, which is massage. It's moving the lymph, it's moving the blood, it's toning the muscles, it's getting rid of toxins. It's a wonderful thing. There was a man He was a black man in the Midwest somewhere. He had a stroke. He went into a coma. No, he went not a stroke. He just went into a coma. And so he was in a hospital for a long time. The children says, can we take him home? Yeah, you can take him home. He can die here. He can die there. And so what they did is they would massage him every day. And he was there for a couple of years. And he looked completely toned. He didn't waste away. Usually when somebody is in a coma, they start to waste away. They go into the fetal position because they're not using the muscles, use it or lose it. They kept it toned up. And he was perfectly normal looking. Looks like he'd just taken a nap. Okay? Passive exercise. There is hydrotherapy. You ever heard of Warm Springs, Georgia? That's where Franklin Delano Roosevelt would go for his hydrotherapy, for his polio. And we're going to be talking about this tomorrow, the physical effects. Derivation and fluxion. This is going back and forth between hot and cold. Fantastic if you have a problem. But here's something interesting. I'll talk about it tomorrow too. If you break your arm, do you need healing in your arm? Okay. How many have had a broken arm? Okay. I've had a lot of broken bones. You're not going to put your cast in hot water for 3 minutes and in cold water for 30 seconds. You will make your orthopedic surgeon very upset with replacing your cast every day. What you do is you do it with the other arm. There's a reflex action. Doing it here increases circulation here. Now we know reflex action, if you want to test somebody for a brain injury, you do the pupillary reflex. That's much more pronounced than we do here, but if you measure the temperature in this hand when you put it in hot water, it's going to go up. And you put it in cold water, it's going to go down. So we can increase circulation by using other parts of the body. We're going to talk about lots of ways we can use hydrotherapy tomorrow. Vasodilation. When you get out in the sunshine dilates your blood vessels. Matter of fact, if a person exercises in the sunshine, they can lower their blood pressure 15%. Not millimeters, 15%. And that extends for quite a period of time in the body. We had a patient one Sunday morning at UT Pines. Her blood pressure was too high. So Dr. Wynn Horsley, he took her outside, laid her in a lounge chair in the sunshine, and exposed her arms and, knees down. Took her blood pressure every 5 minutes, and her blood pressure is doing this. Went right down to normal again. So you got high blood pressure, sunshine dilates your blood vessels. Viscosity. Our blood is 93% water, the plasma part. If you're not drinking enough water, your blood becomes viscous. You do not want viscous thick. You don't want thick blood. You got to drink your water. How much? 3 to 4 liters a day. Now the children, that's a little bit much, but we need to be drinking far more water than we drink. All right, so another way to put that is what we do with our bodies will help us with the circulation. And then the third golden pillar, which to me, next to trusting in God, is the most important one, and that's what we're spending the afternoon talking about today. That is our attitude about life. What we think. See that lady in the purple and the white? That's my mother on her 90th birthday. She always looked like that. The happiest woman I've ever known. I was so blessed to have such a mother. Matter of fact, on her 75th birthday, we started having reunions. 75th, 80, 85, 90, 95. And on this one, this was a God thing. We had family members from California, from New England, from Florida. 3 or 64 family members all coming together just for my mother. She died 2 years ago now, just before her 97th birthday. Okay, so you got a foundation, you got your 3 golden pillars, but pillars are there for a purpose. They hold up something. 8 laws of health. Whenever I teach lifestyle principles, I ask my students, how many laws of health are there? They all raise their hand, 8. I say, okay, that's the last time that's going to be the correct answer. There's more than 8. There are 15 laws of health. And I'm going to go through them very quickly. You don't have to memorize them. I can send you a sheet that shows you where they all come from. But there's sunshine. We know that that's one of the 8 laws. It's also one of the 15. There is trusting in God. There is exercise, water, air, but there's another A, the most important one. It is your attitude. That's what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. You're going to enjoy it, or cheerfulness. Okay? Then there's an R for rest, but there's another R. There is regularity. What's it say? How does Ecclesiastes chapter 3 begin? To everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under the heavens. We should be on time. As a matter of fact, what did Jesus tell his mother at the marriage at Canaan when she says they're out of wine? What did he say? It's not my time. What time is he talking about there? He was thinking about the prophecy of Daniel chapter 9. It's not my time to come out yet. And you'll see all the way through his lifetime until you get to John chapter 12. He says, now's the time. He knew now was time to be crucified. But he kept saying, my time is not yet. And they were trying to kill him ahead of time, but it says he passed through them and he went on his way. Okay? Regularity, everything. You got to have time. You've got to have a set time for study and exercise. You know why you have to have a set time? Because you'll get too busy to have time. I guarantee you're not going to miss your meals. And you're going to go to bed. But you're going to get so busy with other stuff, I didn't get any exercise today. If you don't have time to exercise, you'll have to find time to get sick. That's just the way it goes. Okay? Diet, nutrition and New Start. But there's another D, and that is dress. Is how we dress important? We're not talking about just morals. We're talking about health. It's very, very important. And I've got a whole thing just on that one. Self-control, nutrition, abstemiousness, however you want to say it, we've got to be controlled. Herbs. We'll be talking about herbs tomorrow. It's amazing what herbs can do. I'm not going to demonstrate a whole bunch on herbs, if anything at all, but I'm going to show you that God can do amazing things through the most common herbs out there. We got to learn what those herbs are, because many of those herbs are going to be our food one of these days. Can you go out there and wildcraft and find out, I can eat this, but I better not eat that? In my garden right now, because I haven't planted it this year, I've got poison hemlock growing, which is a killer. I've also got red dead nettle, which is edible. You just got to know what these, and I got a lot of chickweed, which is very good. Hygiene or cleanliness. Now, in the last 2 years, has that been pounded into your brain housing group? We got to keep clean. Not just our hands, our whole surroundings have to be clean. A clear conscience or innocence. Very important. Now I'm going to start off my next story after I show you the last law of health. We're going to talk about that law right there. I'm only going to mention one story, but you're going to see the power that can be manifested using just clearing up this one right here. And then purity of life. If we had purity of life, can you imagine how many lives would have been saved through abortion, through AIDS, and through all other sexually transmitted diseases going on? Purity of life God gave us to protect us. I saw a cartoon one time. Grandpa, what did you use to keep from getting someone pregnant when you were young? He said, a wedding ring. That works. We talked last night about the blessings of walls. God has, the laws of health are walls that God has around us to protect us from everything out there. And if we're not following those laws of health, we will have to suffer the consequences. When I was in Hawaii, I was stationed in Hawaii, the mission conference president gave a talk on Chinese Kanji by a book written by Margaret Nelson. I think her name was Margaret Nelson, Dr. Dorothy Nelson, called The Discovery of Genesis. I love Chinese Kanji. This is an interesting Chinese word. You know what that word is? You can almost see it. It is a Chinese word for fire. See the fire built up there and the licks of... Because basically, Chinese kanji are pictures. You add a few pictures to get an ideogram, to get a big... You look at the word for create, a big boat. A big boat is a vessel, 8 people. And where to get that? It's all in the language. How was man and woman dressed in the Garden of Eden? Light or fire. They were dressed in shimmering garments of light. Okay? Until something happened. Eve wanders away from her husband, and she gets over there, and here comes a snake. And we know all happens there in Revelation, in Genesis chapter 3. It's very interesting. The word for sin is 4 discrepancies. That's what it is. The number 4 and discrepancies. You read those 1 through 6, and there's 4 discrepancies. Yea, as God said, you can't eat of all these trees. God says we can eat of all these trees, but we can't touch that one. That's second discrepancy. Third one is, you shall not surely die. The fourth one is, you'll be like gods. That's the word for sin in Chinese. Amazing. So she takes the fruit, and what happens to the light that they're surrounded with? It's gone. It's no longer fire. But what word do we have left? It's a Chinese word for man. It's one of the ideograms, one of the pictographs. There's other ones you use in Chinese, but that's one of the main ones right there. He just became man. So now they discovered that they're naked. What do? They got to get them up with their own fig leaf garments. No longer righteousness by faith. They're going to do it righteousness by works. And they felt something they never felt before. When Jesus was walking there, calling for them, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was what? I was afraid. God never wanted man to understand what that felt like. Because I was naked. Who told you you were naked? Well, did something wrong. We talked last night about fear of God. This is going to be very short. This is the picture. This is what I told you about. I came home from a trip, and there was a tree laying across my pickup truck. You know, and the insurance company called. Well, that's an act of God. We can't give you any money for your truck. I talked about the 2 people I feared. This was the first one. We were afraid. This was my father, United States Marine. And the other one that I feared, it was my mother. She was also a United States Marine. I feared her out of respect. I did not want to hurt my mother in any way. Isn't she a beautiful lady? She was just a wonderful lady. Fear God. We need to fear hurting our Heavenly Father. And that's what sin does. Okay, I poked too soon. Okay, here's New Start. You know what the nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, air, rest, and trusting in the Lord. We look at that and we say we got a problem. There is a hole in that particular wall. And so we got to look at the 15 laws of health, and there they are. And we'll talk about those. Well, we just talked about those. If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. And you keep that temple holy by what you do with your body and what you put in your body. Of course, we put bad things in our body too, and that defiles God's temple, and it makes him very sad. And when we defile that temple, we looked at this in Ecclesiastes 10 verse 8 last night, whoever breaks through a wall, what's going to happen? It says, a serpent shall bite him. I told the story, I think, last night of a friend of mine from Academy. She smoked for 50 years after she left Academy. When I finally connected with her in 2020, she had fourth stage COPD. She ended up she was discovered with lung cancer by January, and she was dead by April of 2021. Raised as Seventh-day Adventist. The serpent got her, but I did everything I could between August and that time to rebuild her relationship, like I did for Silas this morning, to rebuild her relationship with God. Her big problem was her stepfather was the Ohio evangelist, and he physically abused her and her mother, and then he started hitting on her sexually. She hated the church. But you can't hate the church. It wasn't the church, it was the man. And okay, a clear conscience, innocence. That little girl, her name is Esther. She's 8 years old now. She's fluent in Russian, Romanian, and Bulgarian. She's trying to learn English because she loves me like her father, and she wants to be able to talk to me. But this child is so sensitive to the Holy Spirit. Now, if she'd been there today when Rosa had her special music, she'd have been leaning forward and tears in her eyes. But if someone got up here with their trap set and, boom, 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 and done that stuff, she would have started crying and she would have been out that door. Without asking parents or anything, she would be out of there because she knows that is bad. She is a very, very spiritual child. So, a clear conscience. This is a law of health. Tell you a little story now. I was doing a series of lectures in a place called Oita, Japan. This has been some years ago. Got done with the lectures. It was Saturday night and maybe even Sunday night. And this woman, it wasn't this woman, it's just a picture. She comes to me and she says, I need help. Can you help me? And I said, well, what's your problem? She says, I've got pain all over my body. I have very bad digestion. I've got insomnia. I get panic attacks. She had this long list of problems. She finally got done with listing all her problems and looked at me with her sad eyes. Now, last night I mentioned there's two questions you ask at this point. What's the first question? What are we looking for? Because I knew that these were symptomatic. I asked her, how long have you had these symptoms? Without hesitating, you know what she said? 42 years. What's your second question? What happened 42 years ago? We're looking for the cause. And it's amazing, as I've used this technique over the years, 90% of the time I find the cause. If they can trace it back to a major life event, they started a medication, they had an accident, whatever, I can trace it back there, correct that, you correct the symptoms. 42 years. I said, what happened? She says, I got very sick. They took me to the hospital and they found two things. I had appendicitis and I was pregnant. And she says, when they told me I was pregnant, she says, oh, my husband doesn't want me having children yet. And the doctor says, well, we can take care of that problem for you. She was wheeled into the surgery. When she came out, the appendix was gone and the little girl was gone. I just found her problem. What's her problem? You know, that's the first thing everyone always says is guilt. Exactly right. She had guilt. She also had loneliness. She was carrying a heavy burden. She was angry at those doctors. She had all these emotional things going on in her body for 42 years. What do you do with guilt? I took her to the Word of God. Now, you don't just sit there and say, oh, read this verse here. If we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and then cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Now, what's your next problem? No, we probably spent a half hour unpacking that verse. What did it cost Jesus Christ to be able to forgive your sins? We spent a long time with that particular problem. until I realized she was getting it. The guilt was receding. All right? Other problems she was having. She had, she was carrying this heavy burden. Matthew 11, 28 through 30. Come unto me, all you that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and you shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So we unpacked, I just have the first verse in there, but we unpacked it. She spent time until she wasn't just hearing it, reading it, she was hearing it, she was understanding it, she was internalizing it. That's what needs to happen. The fact that she had no peace, Jesus Christ says, peace I leave with you. My peace give unto you, not like the world gives, give unto you. Let not your hearts be troubled. She had a lack of peace. I told her about Jesus and that he offers us peace. We went down the whole list, and God was giving me these Bible verses, just popping them into my mind. But the last one, what about the loneliness, the missing of that little girl? What do you say about that? That child would have given her grandchildren by now. I took her to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 16. Wonderful verse. For the Lord himself should descend from heaven with a shout and the voice of an archangel and the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. I said, if you are faithful, when Jesus comes, you're going to rise up. And as you're rising up, you're going to be handed that baby to raise in heaven. I believe that with all my heart. She was completely well in 2 days. No pain, no insomnia, no digestion problems, no nothing in 2 days. We solved the problem of the lack of a clear conscience. Cleaned her up. And another lady, I think the same trip, I did the same thing with her. She had been incarcerated in a mental institution by her husband and his family to get all of her stuff, and she came out of there broken. Spent an afternoon with her, and she was fine before we left the room. Anyone can do this because it's not us. It's the power of God working through his word, helping these people. We've got to give that comfort to people. But I'm going to chase a rabbit now, but I can stay on because I got this thing in my hand. The next slide tells me where I'm at. I don't know if I told this story last night, but it's a very significant story. You know, it says in Psalm 119, verse 11, thy word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee. Now, I'm not a Randy Skeet. I think he's got everything memorized in 5 different versions of the Bible. I'm not like that, but I've got some pretty important verses memorized. I'm in London, and there for a few months I'm lecturing, and I'm invited to speak to a group of atheists and agnostics. Are they interested? And they wanted health talk. Are they interested in health? Why? This is all there is. They got to enjoy as much as they can because they get sick, they're going to die and become dirt. And that's all they think. So I go there and I gave a long lecture on things about health, and I left out, the trusting in God because they don't want to hear that. When I get done, any questions? A guy raised his hand. He says, the Bible says, they know the Bible. They're looking for inconsistencies to use against the Bible. And he quotes Isaiah 9, verse 6. Now, if you've ever sang the Hallelujah chorus, you've sang that verse. And his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. And then he says, and he quotes Matthew chapter 10, I think 32 or 33, but Jesus says, think not that I've come to send peace, but a sword. Now, what's he seeing in these 2 verses? Contradiction. It doesn't work. But then I took him to the verse I showed you a minute ago. I took him to John chapter 17, verse 14, verse 27, where he says, peace I give unto you. Not like the world gives, give unto you. Let not your heart be troubled. It says, peace inside. Folks, if we don't have peace inside, when that time of Daniel chapter 12, verse 1 hits, you're going to be lost because of the turmoil. We got to have peace. There is a whole psalm for our day and the days just ahead. What psalm do you think that might be? Yes, Psalm 91. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Memorize the entire psalm. There's 5 conditions. All the rest are promises. 1,000 shall fall at your hand and 10,000 at your right hand, but the plague shall not come near you. Is that a good promise? COVID just around. Claim the promises. Fulfill the conditions. We got to fulfill the conditions. Okay. Where did modern medicine come from? What philosophy did it come from? Huh? Greek philosophy. The Greeks saw us as 2 parts. All right, the first part was the body or the soma. Okay? What's the second part? It's the psyche or the mind. All right, we got the psyche and the soma. Put both those words together. What do you have? Psychosomatic, exactly. How many diseases are psychosomatic? That means diseases of the body beginning in the mind. 90% begin in the mind. Now, that said, if 90% of diseases begin in the mind, where do 90% of cures begin? We got to cure the mind. I think that's just absolutely amazing. Here's my little friend again, a few years later. And the very God of peace sanctify you wholly, and I pray, God, your whole spirit and soul and body be preserved blameless unto the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. All right? We know where these things are. The spirit, we got the soul, we got the body. Where's the body? Right there. That's what's sitting in your seat right now. Your body's sitting there. You may not recognize it. Where is the soul? Now, I realize these terms can be confusing. If you look at the Chinese word for create, it's very interesting. It's the word for dust and dirt. It's the word for walk. It's the word for person or a mouth. And the little thing called the pia, which gives it life. And the Lord God formed man, walking, of the dust of the ground, which is a cross on top of the ground, breathed into his nostrils, the mouth, the breath of pia, life, and became a living, what? Soul. So basically, in this particular thing, what Paul's talking about, it's our mind. That's your soul, the thing that thinks. Where's the spirit? It's the frontal lobe of your brain. When you go to heaven, am I going to take my glasses with me? If I had to, I probably would lose them and forget where they are. Are you going to take your gray hair if you got gray hair? You're going to take all your defects and your deformities, your scars and all. We're not going to take any of that stuff. Only one thing we take from earth to heaven unchanged, and what is that? Our character, which is found in the frontal lobe. It's so important to take care, to guard the avenues to the soul. Your eyes, your ears especially, and your mouth and your nose and your tactile senses. We got to be very careful. So we got to protect all 3 of these things, and God will help us do that. But here's our problem in our Babylonian world. If we have problems with the body, we might go to an internist. If we have problems with the soul, we might go to a psychiatrist. And then if we have problems with the spirit, we might call in the chaplain. Folks, they should all be the same person. Matter of fact, Sister White says our doctors should be pastors, and our pastors should be doctors. Maybe not pastors with medical degrees, but they should know how to minister to the human body. Because when you minister to the human body, let me just give you an example of this. One of the other elders in my church, he's got an old friend. And one day, one Sabbath afternoon after potluck, he says, let's go visit Carl. I says, fine, let's go visit Carl. We go to his house, and Carl, he could hardly walk. His feet really hurt. I said, well, let's look at your feet. Took off his shoes and his socks. He had toenails, inch long, beyond the toe, completely encrusted with crud, and everything was nasty. So I asked my friend, go get me a basin of warm water. Now, I didn't have it at the time. I've since bought it, and I'll bring it tomorrow for the demonstration. I got a really nice set of podiatry tools. Not really professional podiatry tools, but things to really do a fantastic job of doing pedicures. But I used his clippers. And I used things, and I dug out the crud, and I trimmed them up. He could not believe this guy was on his knees, touching his nasty feet, cleaning his nasty feet, making it so nice, he felt like a new man when we got done. He could put his socks on and he could dance around the room. We can all do this. We can all help people who are hurting, and we need to learn how to help people who are hurting. Okay, these are the people. I'm going to be going here in August. I'll be visiting these people. Right now, they're in Montenegro. Anyone ever been in Montenegro? It's probably the most beautiful country I've ever been in. I've been in a lot of countries, but it is fantastic. Well, we're going into now the law of attitude or cheerfulness. Sister White used the word cheerfulness. I use attitude because it fits into the acronym stewardship. What is a steward? What's a steward? Someone that takes care of something that belongs to somebody else. You are not your own. We have stewardship over this body, which belongs to God. We read the verse. We got to take care of our bodies. Okay. Our whole life is about making choices. Have you ever woken up like this? Yeah. And, you've got a choice at that point. You can stay like that the whole day long, or you can change your attitude. It's a choice that we make. You can ruin your life and everyone else's life around you, or you can... How do you change? You wake up in the morning, you're really feeling bad. What can you do? Now, you're going to say pray and all this stuff, but there's something else you can do. You can practice the law of reciprocal influence. Okay? And what is that? It's like if the world gives you lemons, what should you do? Make lemonade. When you're feeling bad, sing a song. A happy song, not some rock song, some happy hymn. I like Dare to Be a Daniel. Grew up listening to that, singing that in primary, whatever school it was I was in. But we can make a choice. Now, it's nothing to do. If any of you ever studied psychology, Hertzberg and Maslow, talking about the need hierarchies. All right, let's look at these two places right here. We've got the Mojave Desert. We've got Hawaii. I lived in both places. Uh-oh, we got the good, bad, and the ugly just leaving right there. January 71 to October 72, I lived in the Mojave Desert. From July 80 to July 83, I lived on the island of Oahu. From my daughter's bedroom, you can see Diamond Head. What do you think my favorite place to live was? Everyone says Hawaii. It was the worst place I have ever lived in my life. Oh, it's beautiful. The weather's great. Hated my job. Didn't get along with my boss. My whole life, except for my daughter being born there, my whole life was upside down. I hated it. 29 Palms, California, even to today, is the best place I have ever lived. I learned to love the desert. The high desert of Southern California, in the evening times, the purple mountains and the clouds and the blue sky. I'd run 10 miles from Joshua Tree National Monument down to my house. The road runners, the coyotes, the desert quail, and my life was great, had a great boss. As a PFC, I was the editor of the base newspaper. Everything was fantastic. It's not where you're at, it's what's happening to your life. and we make it what it is. It's all up to us. The millennials. You know, people think, oh, this generation is going to finish it. If any generation should have finished it, it should have been my generation, the baby boomers. We were the biggest generation ever, but we didn't finish it. The next generation didn't finish it, and the next one. Now the millennials. Here they did a big survey. What do millennials look for? They want to be famous. They want to get rich. That's their focus. Praise God, I didn't see too many millennials in here today, because I don't see too many millennials here right now either. Maybe that's telling me something. But our society has gone crazy. Okay, take your picture. Nice picture. That's a nice picture. Okay. Harvard study of adult development. This is a fantastic study. If you want to understand what a good study is, you look at how long it was, how many people were involved in the study. Okay, that's two big indicators. So here's what they did. 724 young men were chosen in 1938. Half of them were sophomores at Harvard. That means they were probably upper middle class, they were intelligent, they were squared away. The other half were from the poorest sections of the slums of Boston. And they followed them since 1938. 75 years later, 60 of them were still in the program. Now that's a fantastic study. 60 are still alive in 2013 and still participating in the study. Now, to find out, to discover what they discovered in the study is very, very significant for us today. Here's what they discovered. Wealth or fame or working harder don't bring happiness. Not at all. How many people you know have a job they absolutely hate, but it pays good money? Why would you do that to yourself and spend that 40 years? And when you finally get out of that job you hated the whole time, you got so much stuff, bitterness bottled up inside of you that you don't last too long normally. I like this one right here. Good relationship keeps us happier and healthier. Those who had good relationships. Whenever I'm in a big group, sometimes I'll ask this question. I won't ask it today. I'll ask how many people have been married 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. And every time I see the hands go up, it just makes my heart sing. I love to see people who stuck it out through the hard times. Social connections are good for us. Loneliness kills. You've heard that study. They say old people, if you don't have a spouse, get a pet. Because if you don't have anyone to lavish love and affection on, it's going to kill you. We've got to do that. Study, American Journal of Epidemiology. This was a study done from Harvard University. Now I mention Harvard because Harvard is hardly a mecca for religious experiences, although it was first created to be a seminary for pastors back in the 1700s. So they looked at 28,000 men. Is that a big study? Between the ages of 42 and 77, they looked at them for 10 years. And what they were doing is what will promote people having fatal heart disease that will kill them. Now they realize high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and all these different things, so they can factor all of those things out. They're saying, is there anything we did not find? And they found two things. First thing was those without close friends or social network. Second thing is even more alarming. Those who did not go to church on a regular basis. This is coming from Harvard University. To me, this makes that even more astounding because they're being honest with their own study. If you did not have those two things, significantly increased risk of death from heart disease. Amazing. People need people. We're going to look at Bible verses about that too. Some other lessons learned. More socially connected, the happier, healthier, and you live longer when you have social connections. People need people. If you don't have people, get a pet. But the other side of that coin, The more isolated a person is, the less happy they will be. Their health declines quicker, declines quicker, brains deteriorate more often, and lives are shorter. We're going to be talking about, what's he doing right there? Yeah, there's a science in the look on your face. We're going to look at the science. What you want is du chien. You want to be du chien. You'll find out in a minute. Bottom line, quality relationships is everything. You got good relationships? If not, work on it. Ask God to give it to you. Living in conflict is very bad for a person's health. Cortisol levels go up, you're dissatisfied, it causes all kinds of problems. Living in good relationships is very protective. I love that picture. It just does something good for my heart. Can you imagine how long they've been together? And they still, look at her face. Does she love that man? She loves that man. Man. All right, now, once making it to midlife, how many lived into their 80s? That's interesting. When you look at lifespans, they go from birth to death, and then from 50s or 60s, how much longer do they have from there? That's very interesting. You reach the age in the 50s. What's the age? Well, it's the cancer age. It's the heart disease age. It is the stroke age. It is, I think I'm a dying age. Okay? So, once make it, how many live to be in their 80s? Not about cholesterol, but about how satisfied they are with their relationships. That's the factor that will make you live longer. And the bottom line is, those with the best relationships in their 50s were the healthiest in their 80s. Yeah. Take good care of your relationships. Those in their 80s, when they had pains, they had problems going on, if they had good relationships, they were better able to handle the pain. Especially true for those in happy relationships. But those in bad relationships, when they had the pain, it was worse for them. Because now it's bad in their minds, it's bad in their body. We need to have good relationships. You heard enough about good relationships? Good relationships don't just protect our bodies, but our brains too. Minds stay sharper longer when you have good relationships. I remember when my stepfather was declining, he was getting dementia. And I was visiting him, and he called my mother Prissy. Her name was Priscilla. Prissy, where are we going? We're going to Myers, Gene. Prissy, where are we going? We're going to Myers, Gene. Prissy, where are we going? We're going to Myers, Gene. She never changed. Now, do yourself a personal check inside. How long would it take you to sit and say, I told you we're going to Myers. Now, shut it up and we'll go in a few minutes. She never changed. She would say that all day long she had to. I'm an impatient man. I need to be more like my mother. My father was the impatient. Why did I get my father's genes? Let thy fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. This is a verse that breaks my heart because I'll never know what that's like. Lost my wife, but to be able to rejoice with the wife of your youth, I can't think of anything better. You've shared a lifetime together. You know all the ins and outs. You've known the times you've cried. You know you've times you loved. You know, laughed. You know the times you lost. You know the times you gained. And you can share these things. These are the nice things you can do on warm nights, cold nights with a warm fire talking about things. What we need to do is replace screen time with people time. How many times you see that situation in the top picture? All the young people sitting there with their noses in their cell phones. I ride the trains in Japan, even the old people, they got holding on, looking at their cell phone. Some of them playing video games. I don't know what they're looking at. It's all in Swahili. I can understand it. Repair broken relationships. All right, some words of wisdom. This is a very interesting saying. You won't forget it. You may not be what you think you are, but what you think you are. You got it? What goes on up here is going to affect how you relate to people. You've got to have right thoughts. But some people think, well, life's not fair to me. That's what the goldfish is saying in the little bowl. Now, if life was ever unfair to somebody, it would be to, oh no, I should be looking here what's coming next. Okay. I was listening to a sermon by Ron Kelly. How many have heard of Ron Kelly? All right. He's a good speaker. And he was talking about his movie called Pollyanna. And he said that Pollyanna taught people a game. Does anyone know what the game was? I had to look it up. I had to get online and look at Pollyanna. And it was called the Glad Game. Whatever the situation is, try to find out something in that situation that you can be glad about. And she was changing people's lives. Now, yes, that was a movie, but it's amazing. If you can change people's attitude, you can change their lives. People think, let me give you an example. I was taking a German nurse from Uchee Pines up to the Atlanta airport many years ago. And I just drove around to the departure. She got out, said goodbye, Hannelore. And I got back down, you go around, you get on 85 and go south. I turned up 285 going north. I thought, stupid. Why do you do that? You've made this trip so many times. Then I said, wait a minute. I said, Lord, we're told that we may not always understand why things go wrong down here. We'll find out in heaven. But I said, just once, I'd like to know why I do stupid things. So I took the first exit, went across, came back down, got on. As I was going on to 75, a car was stopped. A young man had gotten out, car pulled, and he put out his thumb. And God says, that's why. I would have been 5 miles down the road. But I pulled over. I knew this is the guy. He gets in the car, and we start talking. And I've been reading the discovery of Genesis and mysteries Confucius couldn't solve. So I'm driving down Interstate 85 from Atlanta towards Montgomery, and I'm steering with my legs, and I'm writing Chinese and explaining the characters. And first of all, I asked him how far he was going. He said he was going to Opelika. I said, well, I'm just going to 185 down to Columbus. He says, fine. So I'm doing all this Chinese stuff and explaining how everything in the Bible is explained in Chinese Kanji. And then he says, you just passed 185. I says, no, I'm taking you to your destination, because I had a captive audience. And so we drive all the way. He was he was in a rock band. He was rejoining his rock band. They'd been on a break. They were staying in a hotel. I guess they're going to do a rock concert there somewhere. I pulled up, and I reached back then. I always carry books. I gave him, I think, Great Controversy and the Desire of Ages. And he says, you know, it's interesting. My parents were missionaries to China for 10 years. Was that a divine appointment? And he says, I think it's time for me to go home. Yeah. Amazing. Quit the band, went home. All things work together for good. We've got to find reasons to be glad. Rethinking your problems. There's a golden lining in there somewhere. If we're living in Christ, all things work together for good to those who love him. All right, here's the guy I was thinking about. Was life fair to Nick Luchuk? How many do not know this guy? He's amazing. He was born with no arms and no legs. He's got a little thing he called a chicken leg. He's got a little thing. He can type 40 words a minute with it. I can't type 40 words a minute with two hands. He can do it with this little flopping around down there. He's got a family. And he travels the world encouraging young people and old people. Because I can't imagine being born this way. No arms and no legs, but he says, I love life. So what's our problem? We've all got our faculties together and all these different things. How about Jen Bricker? How many of you have ever heard of Jen Bricker? All right, now she's an amazing lady. When she was born, her father went to the hospital. He looked at her. He got his wife, and they left the hospital, left the baby there. This was in Bucharest, Romania. She was born with no legs. Nothing. A couple from Illinois adopted her, brought her to America, and they had one rule in that house. We need to all practice this one rule. One word you cannot use is the word can't. Don't use that word. You can do anything you want. You know what her dream was as a child? A gymnast. She wanted to be a gymnast. And she became the state gymnastic champion. I've seen her work. She is amazing. She runs down to her arms. She does all the flipping and all the. She's an amazing thing. But growing up, she had an idol. Someone that she really looked up to. It was Dominique Morciano. You ever heard of Dominique Morciano? All around gold in the Olympics. I forget what year it was. She really idolized, and that's the wrong term because she wasn't an idol worshiper or anything, but she really loved this lady. Well, this is that lady a little bit older. Well, at one point, Jen wanted to find out where her roots were. Dominique was her sister. That is Dominique and Jen Bricker. And there was another sister involved too. God is good. And they're very close now. The father wanted his children to be athletic, and a person with legs cannot be athletic. He thought, for that she proved him wrong. But there are people all over. How many ever heard of Joni Nada? I mean, she's amazing, isn't she? She paints with her mouth. She's not that lady painting with her mouth, but she is a fantastic person. Diving accident, paralyzed from the neck down, but so positive. Guy with no arms and legs wrestling, and he's a good wrestler. The guy painting with his toes, running with no legs is an amazing thing. If you think you can do something, you're right, you can. We need to teach our children this. You can do anything you put your mind to. But the flip side, if you can't think you can do something, you're right, you can't. And we got to be very careful with negative talk. When someone says you're stupid and you're young, you get to the point where you believe it. I remember one time, one thing I hated to do was help my father, because he wouldn't teach me anything. I was just a gopher. He was working in the kitchen. He says, Donnie, go downstairs to get me my diagonals. You don't ask questions. You go downstairs to get the diagonals. I had no idea what a diagonal was. I knew it was a geometric shape, but he had this big tool board, pegboard with all these tools. Oh, what's the diagonal? I don't know what a diagonal is. This must be a diagonal. I took it up there, and of course it wasn't a diagonal. I know what a diagonal is now, but he told me how stupid I was, how worthless I was, and that has never left me. Never left me. Words. Matter of fact, if you read especially the first 3 chapters of James, he really pounds the evil in the tongue. I like that part at the end of chapter 3. But the wisdom that is from above is first peaceful. I forget how it goes now. But the wisdom that is from above is first and pure and then peaceable, gentle and easy being treated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. But the wisdom that is from beneath, that's the other side, and it's all found in the tongue. We're told that we could tame, the appetite, and that's where a lot of that's in the tongue. If we get the victory over appetite, we could gain the victory over the sin, sinful besetment. But if we could gain the victory over the tongue, it says right there in James, we can conquer the world. So I was in the 5th grade. First of all, I hated school. No one here hated school as much as I hated school. 5th grade, we had an assignment, 13 questions. I remember it like it was yesterday. You know what I did? I did the assignment. I answered 12 of the 13 questions. Next day, all right, we're going to go over the assignment. Does anyone have the answer to number 1? Man, I was flagging like this, and she calls someone over here. Okay? Anyone have the answer to number 2? Yay, I'm over here. 3, 4, 5, all the way up through 12. All right, does anyone have the answer to number 13? I made myself real small in front of the person in front of me. You know what the teacher said? Don Miller, do you have the answer? I didn't get it. She says, well, you stay after school and we'll see if you get it. I do not like the word get. I try not to use the word get. This was in the 5th grade. And she basted me up one side and down the other. Be careful how you talk to people, even old people. Old people, young people, people in the middle. Don't use verbal abuse on these people because it's a hard time getting it out of the brain. Okay, I love this. Positive emotions are unmistakably linked to better health. We've got to think positive. C. Everett Koop. Have you ever heard of C. Everett Koop? What was he? The Surgeon General of the United States under Reagan and the first Bush. He was the first and only Surgeon General who became a household name. You can't name too many other Surgeon Generals. Matter of fact, his nickname was Chick Koop. We have a LLC in Liberty, Kentucky. His the executive director of the Koop Institute is a husband of a church member at our church. And he did the lecture. Koop was well known for his fight against tobacco. He was well known for making AIDS a common term and trying to get rid of the stigma about that. He was the first pediatric surgeon. When they were doing pediatric surgery after World War II, they were using instruments made for adults and using anesthesia in adult amounts on babies, and they lost many babies. He was the first one. And he started creating instruments for infants. But another thing he got into was the law of the mind, changing the whole dynamic. You would be spellbound if he were here giving you that particular. He's a lawyer, but he was fantastic. But they got a lot of architects and doctors and a lot of people together looking at what they can do to change the landscape of medicine. Now, here's an old hospital. Would you really like to go there? Big concrete place with little windows, and the inside darkened halls with, shiny, smells like antiseptic. They changed the whole thing. These are hospitals of today. Sort of along the line of Patch Adams in his Gesundheit Institute. And he showed us many pictures of things that were inspired by C. Everett Koop. He realized that our surroundings had a profound effect upon the body. As a matter of fact, in the old days, when you had hospital wards, where you had bed, and you had a window here, the further away from the window, the higher the mortality. Have you ever heard the story about two men were in a hospital room, and one guy was laying next to the window, and the other guy was in the next bed over? And this guy was laying in the next bed over. He couldn't move much. He was laying there, and the guy in the next bed was just describing what was going on outside. Oh, there's some birds flying. There's some children playing down in the park. He's just making a beautiful, and this guy was just loving the pictures he was hearing. And but he wanted to be by the window. And so one night, this guy started having a medical emergency, and he didn't sound the buzzer, and the guy died. Now he gets the window, and he gets moved over to the window, and he turns. There's a brick wall there. The guy never saw a thing. He was making it up to make him feel better. We need to make our world a little bit brighter than it is. All right? Negative emotions are a reliable predictor of worse health. People who are negative are going to be sicker. Very interesting things here. Depression. When people have depression, this is some of the advice that they receive. And this is all bad advice. First of all, deny it exists. Put a mask on. Smile even though you're dying inside. Some of you are nurses. What happens if you have a wound that is not completely cleaned out inside and you stitch it up? What's going to happen? A 10-day-old surgical wound with an abscess beneath. It's going to be worse than it began. It's going to swell up and it's going to explode out and you're going to have a bigger mess than you began with. It's got to be clean on the inside. Don't hold it in. Second thing, vent your anger. Don't vent your anger. Why? Expression deepens impression. If you're feeling down, don't talk about feeling down. Talk about how good God is, what a beautiful day it is, I enjoyed my lunch. Find something positive to talk about. For many things we offend all, but if any man offend not in word, this is a verse I mentioned a while ago, the same as a what? Perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body, if we could just control the tongue. We're so easy to say the words. Learn how to hold the words back. Eat your words, or you'll have to eat them later one way or the other. Fix it with drugs. The problem with drugs is side effects of psychotropic drugs. And I've seen people who've been on psychotropic drugs, psychosis, mania, hallucinations, suicidal thoughts, heart attack, stroke, sudden death, and it goes on and on. It always amazes me when you're listening to the radio. When I travel, I listen to radio sometimes, and it'll talk about a new drug. This drug will do this, but this can happen. I'm thinking, why would you ever want to take that drug? Chance of death goes up, liver failure goes up, and all these things. No, we got to get back to God's way. And taking psychotropic drugs is not the way. Drugs for depression. 82% of therapeutic effects of antidepressants were experienced by patients taking a placebo with none of the side effects. I'm going to show you a very interesting story about that a little bit later on. Do you think you all need a break? We've been going for an hour and a half. Trouble with breaks. I usually don't like to give breaks because there's no such thing as a 10-minute break. And many people, when you give them a break, they break. Just break out of here. But I think I need to let you stand up and stretch a little bit because we need to do that. So and when, if you need to go out and go to the bathroom or get a drink of water, which I do, but come back soon because we're going to be going right back through it. Okay, we're talking about negative thinking, and we don't want to dwell on negative thinking, but if we learn what it does to us, we might find a way to practice the glad game. There is a study, there's a study going on how much calcium the body needed. So they had a group of people, and each day they were giving them 1,500 milligrams of calcium. And then they would collect their feces and their stool to see how much they were excreting every day. One man was excreting 800 milligrams of calcium. So basically that means that his body only needs 700 milligrams of calcium. And it's consistent. He just kept day after day. Right in the middle of the study, his wife died. And he went into a depression, but he stayed in the study. Same thing, 1,500 milligrams of calcium, but he was no longer losing 800 milligrams of calcium. He was losing 2,300 milligrams of calcium. Now, according to the California Tissue Institute and a number of other studies show that depression causes osteoporosis. And I can also extend it out to people who have negative thinking. It causes osteoporosis. But that was very, very revealing. So here's one of the, I do have the study here. Archives of Internal Medicine. Depression may be a risk factor for lower bone mass in pre-menopausal women. We usually think that osteoporosis is a post-menopausal problem. If a person's depressed, they're going to have thinner bone density in the femoral neck, and basically it's not just a femoral neck, it's every bone in your body are going to be more easy to break because of your depression. Have you ever anticipated a happy event? You know that when we just anticipate a happy event, things happen physiologically in our body. One, we produce more beta endorphins. What's another name for beta endorphin? Yes, a happy hormone. They're increased 27%. But also, human growth hormone is produced more by 87%. Just anticipating a happy event. So, what does beta endorphins and human growth hormones do for a body? Well, the beta endorphins strengthen your immune system, amongst many other things. And the human growth hormone helps build your immune system. So if you are feeling sick, maybe we should start being really positive. Norman Cousins, how many have heard of Norman Cousins? Okay, not a common name anymore, but he got cancer. And he went into a type of therapy. He watched Laurel and Hardy movies and the Three Stooges, and he got well. Now, I'm not recommending that as our source of happiness, because it's really a bunch of foolishness. But for him, it worked. A merry heart does good like a medicine. How many of you would like a good shot of beta endorphins right now? All you got to do is smile. If you just smile, it produces beta endorphins. Now, whenever I'm speaking, especially in Eastern Europe, Russians, Ukrainians, people don't like to smile. I say, okay, fake a smile. Even that will help you produce a little bit more beta endorphins. Really neat. I mentioned the study of faces. Really, it's the study of smiles. A smile called a Duchenne smile. And what the Duchenne smile looks at is the muscles engaged in the smile. Now, the major muscle that's involved in a smile is called the zygomaticus major. That's what pulls it up there. Now, I can smile all day long and be just as mad on my heart as there can be. But to know a true smile, you got to look at the orbicularis oculi muscle, which is the one that surrounds your eyes. When you got that squint in your smile, that's a Duchenne smile. And believe it or not, they got whole channels of science just studying the smile. because the smile is a reflector of the attitude, and the attitude is a reflector of the health. I think it's a very good place to be looking. All right, some of you are old enough. How many of you ever collected baseball cards? I was a baseball, okay, some of us did. I liked baseball cards when I was a kid. If I'd held on to all the baseball cards I had then, I'd be a rich man today. Because people buy those things for obscene amounts of money. But they looked at baseball pictures of players who played in the 50s and in the 60s, looking at their smiles, okay? And they looked at Roger Maris, this is just part of the study, Roger Maris and Ernie Banks. Which one is really smiling? Ernie Banks. Really, he loved the game of baseball. Although Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's home run record with 61 home runs that season. But look at something closer. And this is what the scientists were looking at. Something very closer. Roger Maris died at 51. Ernie Banks at 84. The smile. Because Ernie Banks had a philosophy. I recommend we adopt his philosophy. Here's what it was. You must try to generate happiness within yourself. It's not always going to be happy around us. If you aren't happy in one place, chances are you won't be happy any place. How many people do you know? They're going to get unhappy in their marriage. They get divorced. And then they find some other fool that will marry them. And pretty soon it's the same thing because they took themselves and their attitude into the same marriage. You got to generate happiness within yourself. I remember when I was in boot camp, in the Marine Corps boot camp, I had one drill instructor. He put me up against the wall and started hitting me. Now I've got pretty strong solar plexus, but after a while, I started going down. He'd be laughing the whole time. And I'd be going down, and he'd push me back up again and start hitting me again. Well, then I started laughing with him, and that ruined all of his fun. But we got to enjoy life. I look back on boot camp fondly. Wasn't so fond back at the time. All right, 114 women. They were looked at these people from 1958 to 1960. Now they weren't looking at them then. They took the yearbooks from those years, and they looked at them many years later to look at their smiles. Those were the Duchenne smiles, those who were happy people. Here's what they discovered. The ones who had the Duchenne smile, who were positive people, got married and stayed married to the same person their whole lifetime. Those who had the Duchenne smile tended to be more athletic and healthier during their college time. And they stayed that way their whole life. Happiness is something we need to adopt. We need to internalize. We need to be this way. And that's what they were. So my recommendation is learn to smile more. And just looking at that, most people usually laugh when they see that baby there with that teeth. Or I need to find a baby and give them one of those, what do they call them? Teethers or something? Whatever they are. I think that thing's crazy. Now, I'm going to show you a picture. Look closely. You're not going to see the mouth. You're only going to see the eyes. Are these Duchenne children or not Duchenne children? What do you think? They're not. There's the rest of the picture. They are not happy. You know how I know? I'm the boy. Those are my three sisters. My father's taking the pictures. Smile, damn it. That's what we get. Now, you can't do much of a Duchenne smile when you're facing corporal punishment for not smiling. Now, in that family, who has the biggest job in that picture? Who's got the biggest job? The oldest always has the biggest job. Kathy was the one who wanted to protect her. See what she's doing? And she's got her other hand, if you saw the bigger picture, she's holding Linda. And I'm sure she's got her knees pressing against Deborah. to comfort us. Our home was not a happy home. And I remember it must have been 1956, Christmas time. My father came home. He'd been out drinking and shopping, and he had his arms completely loaded with brown paper bags. He did it all in one load. We lived on the second floor of a house. My grandmother and great-grandmother on the first floor. We in the second floor. We slept on the third floor. He's going up. He comes in the kitchen and says, "Get that bag, it's slipping." My mother grabbed the bag. Most of them were slipping. She grabbed the wrong bag. The one that hit the ground was full of bottles of whiskey. They all broke, and the amber flood covered the kitchen floor. I still hear it in my mind. I still see it. He took that into the living room, his bags. He threw them down and says, "There's your Christmas." Next thing I remember, I'm downstairs at the door with my grandmother, his mother. We're both crying. My mother says, "That's it." After school was out, it was second grade, I think it was. My mother, my three sisters, and I, we moved to Bayshore, Long Island, New York. The happiest time of our lives. No alcohol, no swearing, no beatings, no angry words. It was just the most happy time in the world. But my father came and talked my mother, probably promised her the moon to go back. And she did, to Cincinnati. My oldest sister never completely forgave my mother. She could wear the mask very well, but something inside of her, you put us back into hell again. She would come to visit my mother, but she'd never stay in the same house with my mother. She organized the 75th, probably not the 75th, but the 80th, 85th, and 90th birthdays. She was an organizer, but she never completely forgave my mother. In my lifetime, I'm going to be 75 in a week and a half, I've only had one death of anyone in my generation on down. Lost everyone else above except for one aunt. I still got an aunt, believe it or not. But in 2015, my big sister died at the age of 69. First one in my whole, and we got a big family, cousins everywhere, because she held that bitterness inside of her. Whenever I'm talking, especially to a cancer patient, I say, is there anything that you're holding inside of you? Are you angry with somebody? Someone you haven't talked to for 20 years for something you can't even remember what it was. You got to get rid of that thing, because if you don't, whatever you have is not going to go away. You've got to do this thing. You've got to get free. You know, the Civil War, terrible war. Brother against brother, father against son. And one of the biggest battles, one of the most famous battles, was the Battle of Gettysburg. Through the cornfield, those Confederate soldiers walked, I think, 3/4 of a mile, carrying their weapons through the cornfield, being blasted by the Union Army and the cannons and everything else. Well, 75 years later, they finally met and shook hands over the wall. But you're from the Northwest up here. You ever heard the saying, the South shall rise again? For many people, the Civil War is still seething underneath. It's just because it's this thing that happened to people. They got this anger in there. In medical books, unforgiveness is classified as a disease. We got to forgive people. You know, I've forgiven my father. And I've even gone back. You know, sometimes guilt is in the same category. Back in the mid-'60s, I was in part of Cincinnati called Mount Lookout. There was a place called the Mount Lookout Tavern. It's where all the young people went to drink. And I was 3 sheets to the wind, and I was sitting in a booth, and there was a picture on the wall of Peter Fonda on the motorcycle. You probably saw them. Some of you saw the movie. And I thought, I like that black and white poster. I took it off, rolled it up, stuck it down my pant leg, and walked out. Forgot all about it until the late 80s when the Lord brought that back to my mind. And he says, you got to fix this. I says, I do. So I got in my Nissan pickup truck and I drove all the way from Alabama to Cincinnati. Now, the law says if you steal a sheep, you got to replace it fourfold, okay? I'm not going to buy any sheep for the guy, but I figured I'm going to get them the best poster that there is. And I got this big, beautiful, full-color picture of a crouching lion. It was gorgeous. Rolled it up. I went to the Mountain Lookout Tavern. Still there, still the young people sitting around the bar. I walked in, the bartender says, what can I get you? I says, I didn't come to get anything. I says, I got to tell you a story. And I told him the story about stealing the poster off the wall. And I says, I've come to replace the poster. Now, what do you think he said? He didn't know what to say. No one ever confessed him about that. They confessed about all the other kind of stuff, but did not. He said, well, the bar's been sold since then a few times. I says, yeah, but when you sell a bar, the glasses, everything goes with it. I says, I've got to make this right. Now, no one else is drinking. They're all looking at this skinny guy from Alabama saying, where does this guy come from? And he says, and then he said the most amazing words you can ever imagine coming from a bartender. He says, well, I forgive you. Those are God's words. And he says, can I get you a beer? I says, that's what got me in trouble in the first place. I walked out and just burst out crying from the relief. People need to get relief from the things that they've got bottled up inside for years and years and years. Get rid of it, folks, or it's going to get rid of you. We're not going to go to heaven with hate in our hearts. Now, another very interesting study, this was done with nuns, Catholic nuns. Now, they all dressed the same back then. They all dressed like that when I was a kid. They have the same religion, as a matter of fact, and they basically have the same philosophies. But there's something different about the Catholic nuns. They've got different attitudes. And so they divided these groups of nuns up into three different groups. One, they had the positive, one, they had the negative, and one, the forte negative, the really negative ones. And what they wanted to do was see how many would live to be 85. So they followed them. Amongst the positive group, 90% of them lived to be 85. That's a pretty good number. Of the negative group, only 34%. Of the forte negative, only 11% lived to be 85. Attitude. But then they said, well, let's keep this study going. Let's see who's the last ones alive. So by the time they got to the age of 94, the negative and the forte negative were gone, but 54% of the positives were still alive. You want to live a long time? Make it worthwhile. Be happy on the way. That's the only way you're going to do it, folks. A merry heart does good like a medicine. This was discovered by Solomon back 1,000 years before Christ. But a broken spirit dries the bones. We got to learn to be positive. In the 2nd century, there was a Greek physician called Galen. And he made an interesting observation of his breast cancer patients. They all tended to be melancholic. They weren't happy people. Should I tell you this story? I'll tell you this story tomorrow. Yeah, this is a great story. Another interesting study, they looked at two different groups of women, looking at fatal heart disease. They all had the same risk factors for heart disease. Basically, the ones they're looking at, they were overweight and older. They had high cholesterol, they were overweight, and they had high blood pressure. Both of them had the same factors, but the difference was the one group didn't even think about it. They were fat, dumb, and happy, they might say. The other group, they stressed over it. They were always thinking, oh, I've got the risk factors for heart disease. I'm going to die of heart disease. You know what happened? 4 times more the people who obsessed about dying died of the heart disease. They had the same risk factors. You can kill yourself with your thoughts. You realize that? We're going to look at that in some other studies. How many of you have had surgery? I've had surgery. Before your surgery, maybe the night before, the morning of, did the surgeon come in and talk with you? Mine always did. And they just tell them what they're going to do and all this stuff. But if the patient says, doctor, I don't think I'm going to survive this operation, they hate to operate. You know why? Almost all of them will die in surgery because they made the suggestion to themselves, I'm not going to survive this surgery. I like the guy, he was shot. He's taken to the hospital. He's in serious condition. Laying in there, and they're getting ready to do meds and stuff, and the doctor says, are you allergic to anything? He says, yes. They said, what? Lead. The lead bullet that went into his body. Sense of humor. And they all laughed, and the guy came out of it fine. The Bible says something very interesting. Men's hearts failing them for what? What does it mean? What is heart failing them? What do we call that today? Heart attack. Failing them for fear, looking for those things that are coming upon us, upon the world. Do we have bad things ahead of us? Should we be worrying about those things? We shouldn't worry about those things. Worry changes nothing. Worry is blind and cannot discern the future, but God knows the end from the beginning. In every difficulty, he has his way of escape. Those who accept the one principle of making the service and honor of God supreme will find perplexities vanish in a plain path before their feet. Now that's right out of the spirit of prophecy. You know, there's great stuff in the spirit of prophecy. And you know what? Those things work for non-Adventists too. There's nothing wrong. Whenever I quote spirit of prophecy, I usually won't give the reference. I won't even say the name. I'll just quote it. Because the thought is what's inspired. You don't have to say that's found in 3T42 and there's not an end that says, what book is 3T? What's 42? You know, what's that some code word that Adventists have for their Bible? Hurricane Katrina, remember that one? You probably don't have too many hurricanes up here in Idaho, but that was a bad one. Now the interesting thing about it was this is sort of gallows humor, but brilliant. They build a city below sea level in an area with hurricanes and fill it with Democrats. Great idea, okay. I have a friend who's got a dump truck, and they were bringing trucks in there to help clean up the trash. And he said everywhere there was a smell of death. They never found all the bodies. It was a horrible, because some people say, we're going to ride this one out. Well, they ride it right down the shoal because they don't survive those things. But after the sun came out, the sky was blue, everything is fine, they had a thing called the hurricane heart attack. They had 3 times more heart attacks in that area for the next year, for fear what might come next. Men's hearts doing what? Failing them for fear, looking at those things that are coming upon them. We're going to talk about today, tomorrow, and yesterday. You might like this one. Another interesting study. They went to a medical school. They pulled records on students who had graduated 25 years before, looking at hostile attitudes versus positive attitudes. Now this is 25 years later. Then they went out and started looking up all these doctors. And they found something interesting. Those doctors who had more of a negative attitude in medical school, they were all dead. That's just 25 years later. They weren't old people yet. Folks, we got to get some sunshine in our face. Heartbreak increases the risk of heart attack risk. When a person is going through a hard experience, when my sister died, it's the most hurt I've ever felt in my whole life because it was the first death in my generation. But I had to get over it. When my mother died, how many people at 73 still have their mothers? It hurt me a lot, but I had to get past that because I look forward to the resurrection and see my mother again. People mourning the loss of a loved one are 6 times more likely to suffer cardiac arrest for 2 years after that thing. We got to learn to let it go. These things are happening. Your blood pressure goes up when you're under this type of grief and everything else. Blood pressure goes up, increased heart rate. It means your heart is working harder, not enough time to rest. It changes your immune system. It changes your clotting. It increases clotting in your body, which is very bad if you're prone to heart attacks. All these things together increase your risk of heart attack. Someone's gone. Here's what I recommend. When Jesus was crucified, what did Nicodemus do? He brought the 100-pound weight of aloes and spices. What did Joseph of Arimathea do? He gave him his tomb. But they never did it while Jesus was alive. Folks, if you want to have vain regrets, neglect those loved ones who are out there somewhere. Then when they die, you can bring the flowers that they can't smell. You can say the kind words they can't hear. You can drip tears on their coffin they cannot feel. Make peace now. It's so vitally important. You do not want to live a life of vain regrets. Believe me, you don't want to do that. If you feel angry for just 5 minutes, it's very hard to limit anger for 5 minutes. You will decrease your immune system for 6 hours. But, on the other hand, if you feel cared for, appreciated for just 5 minutes, you will increase your immune system for the same 6 hours. Now, when do you think this phenomena first manifests itself in the human experience? 2 babies were born. October the 10th, 1995, they were twins. They were 12 weeks premature. That's way mature. 6 months old. 6 months from conception. One was doing quite fine. The other one was dying. The one that was dying, blood oxygen levels were in dangerous low levels. Heart rate was very irregular. And one day, the baby's temperature started going up. And the hospital staff said, we're going to lose this baby. But the head of the pediatric neonatal unit, a nurse, she broke hospital protocol. She took the healthy baby out of the incubator and put her in with the other baby. The first thing the healthy baby did was put her arm around her sister. The strong baby was placed in the incubator with the weak one, and immediately everything normalized. They slept together in the same bed for the first 5 years. They're very close sisters today. That touch. Now, I've got another picture. I'm not showing it. But there's a doctor in Atlanta who can do surgery for spinal bifida with the baby still in the womb. He repairs the open spine. And the picture is the most, how many have seen the picture? Anyone seen? He's closing. And as he's getting ready to close, a hand comes out and grabs his finger. Thank you, doctor. Baby was born perfectly fine without spinal bifida. Amazing. Happiness may be a more important factor than not smoking. So let's put it another way. To be a happy smoker is about the same as being an unhappy non-smoker. So my recommendation is just be happy non-smokers. I'm a happy non-smoker. April the 1st, 1973, I quit that thing cold turkey. You know what happens when we try to wean ourselves from tobacco? Satan laughs up his sleeve. Look at this fool. Got to get stop the thing. Not long before it gets out of your system. And every time I've thought, after that I became a marathon runner, good distance runner. Still got a distance runner's body, just don't have a different whatever else. It's sort of falling apart by now. The healing part of physical cannot occur without addressing all of its contributing factors. We've got to get to the root of the cause of the illness. Dr. Renke Gerd Hamer, Germany. His son was shot by the Duke of Savoy. And 3 months later, his son dies. Dr. Hamer goes into a real depression, and he develops testicular cancer. Now, he's a doctor, he's a scientist. He says, this is not coincidental. There's got to be somehow a connection here. So he started studying mental and physical of cancer. And here's what he found. If somebody has he looked at 20,000 people with cancer. If somebody develops a cancer, let's say got liver cancer, they will find in scanning the brain a shadow in the same place for everyone with liver cancer. Same conflict is causing that shadow. Let's say it's guilt causing liver cancer. 100% correlation in his 20,000 people that he studied. We've got to get rid of these mental conflicts. Cancer patients are unable to share their thoughts, their emotions, their joys, anything else. They go into what we call psycho-emotional isolation. And I talked this morning about Christ showed sympathy for the people. How did I mention he showed sympathy? The policeman on the Golden Gate Bridge, he listened. When someone is hurting, listen to them. Don't sit there and say, oh, you got this problem, try this. Take this herb and do that treatment. Listen to them. They might just need to get it out of their systems. Then you can encourage them in other ways. But we've got to be very careful with this. Start talking to somebody. Very, very important. But this is a biblical principle. What's it say? Two are better than one. Can anyone finish the verse? If one fall, the other can pick them up. We need people. We need to get closer. We need to understand where people are coming from, what they're going through. It's very, very important. Might it be, now this is from a French economist back in the 19th century. I like what he says. Might it be we've pursued a small present good, which will be followed by a great evil to come? Social isolation, wearing the mask, all the things, lockdowns, all these things. A small good, if any good came out of it, might have a long-lasting problem with us. I think he was spot on right there. The CDC reported a 51% increase in suicide attempts among teen girls during this period of time. 51%. Teenagers. They got the whole life ahead of them. For whatever pushed teens over the edge in years past, the recently mandated government lockdowns resulting in social isolation have caused this global crisis, but it's even worse than that. It's just interesting to study these things. Trouble is, as these things come up, they start to get buried in the back page, and other things come up and make it look like a rosy picture. But this is from the early part. In California, teenage suicide increased 24%, leading to 134 deaths in 2020. In contrast, only 23 California minors died of COVID-19. Dying of loneliness, dying of give-up-itis. We're going to talk about give-up-itis a little bit. Can anyone identify this guy? I'll give you a clue. He wrote War and Peace. Leo Tolstoy. He's the young fellow on the right in the other picture there. When he was a child, he was the youngest child, his brothers had a club. And big brothers don't want little brothers tagging around. And they wouldn't let him join. So he goes, does the typical thing, goes crying to Mama. Mama comes out and says, let Leo in your club. I say, well, fine, but he's got to pass the initiation. Fine, just don't hurt him. Give him your initiation and let him in your club. So the initiation was, you got to go sit in a corner. Now, can you do that? That's pretty easy stuff. You got to sit in a corner and not think about a white bear for a half hour. Could you do that? It's impossible. You're sitting there in a corner, and what are you doing? Every time you turn around, you're thinking about a white bear. So suggestion was made, white bear. Now, this is an interesting one too. There's a carpenter, and this happens all the time. Matter of fact, I did this just the other day. Hammers are nice, but we like to use the nail guns. I was using a brad gun. So this guy's using a nail gun, and he shoots a nail right through his finger. I shot a brad right through my finger, and that hurt a lot. Thankfully, it was a 18 gauge, not the 16 gauge, which I couldn't find. But so the guy said, whoa, nice. Goes to the hospital, have him taken out, all taken care of. There's another guy. He's working up on a ladder, putting the top plate on. He gets done. He comes down off the ladder. He steps on a board with a nail sticking out of it. Goes right through his foot. That hurt. He is screaming in pain. Matter of fact, he's in so much pain, they had to give him a shot of medication before they even got to the hospital. When they got to the hospital, they cut his boot off, and the nail went between his toes. What hurt? His mind saw the nail sticking through his shoe, realizing he just got crucified, and that must really hurt, and he felt every pang of pain that could be. When I first got into natural medicine, I recognized the two main things you deal with in natural medicine which are hard is depression and pain. I'm going to give you a reading assignment. I've bought this book many times and passed it out to a lot of people. Dr. Paul Brand wrote a book called The Gift of Pain. He spent his whole life, professional life, working with lepers and people with diabetic neuropathy. What do they have in common? Well, I guess I'm getting ahead of my story here. They don't feel pain. And they would do anything to be able to feel pain. Because what is pain? Pain is a signal that tissue is being damaged. If we can hear the signal, we can stop the damage. The Gift of Pain, Dr. Paul Brand, it is a fantastic read. Believe me, I've read it a few times because he was a good writer. Well, he wrote it with Philip Yancey. Thank you. Someone else has read the book. Philip Yancey is a good Christian writer. And it's such a good, but you will learn things in there. He talked in the book about the hairbrush doctor. When they were doing a painful procedure, they'd have somebody stroking a person's arm with a hairbrush. That's a major input into the brain. Then they're sitting there doing something over here with a scalpel, but it's divided. The pain is divided because this is pain and this is something else, and the brain cannot pick it all up. When I do trigger point therapy, have anyone ever had trigger point therapy? Does it feel good? When you start smashing that thing, you find that trigger point, and I'll get myself all poised, then I'll put my hand on their head, and I'll start doing this. I'll do a scalp massage, and I'll smash that thing. Well, they're wondering, what are you doing with my head up there? And pretty soon you're done. 8 seconds are gone, and it didn't feel it. That's what he talks about, all those wonderful things. You will really enjoy the book. Okay, placebo. Does anyone know who that man is? Dr. Mervyn Harding started the School of Public Health at Loma Linda. He had 3 doctorate degrees. No one can fool him, right? Well, he was invited to, he lived down in Loma Linda. He was invited to speak way up in New England one winter. Is there a difference in the wintertime between Loma Linda weather and Maine weather? Yeah. Loma Linda's up there. In Maine, it goes way down there. And so he was going to be staying in a person's home, so they stoked up the heat in his bedroom so he could be nice and warm like he would be back home. He gets there, he does his lecture, he gets into the bedroom that night, and it was stifling hot. No fresh air. He says, I'm going to die in this room. It's quiet. Everyone's going to bed. So he gets up and he tiptoes over to the window and he opens it just a little bit. Fresh air came in. The room got cooler. He had a great night of rest. He woke up in the morning and says, I better close that window. I've been wasting all their energy. He goes over. Now it's getting light outside. He realizes in the northern areas, you don't just have one window. You've got 2 windows. We call them storm windows. When he opened the window, it was still closed. But he felt the cool air because down in Southern California, when you open the window, you got a screen which wind can come through. He felt cool. He smelled cool. Everything was cool except for the room. The mind is powerful in its suggestions. All right, now, that was a placebo. That was really a nocebo. What is it? Has anyone heard the word nocebo? That's the opposite of a placebo. This is a negative effect. If someone gives you a negative suggestion, what's going to happen? So they go to a university and they get 34 co-eds and say, we're going to put this thing on your head. It's going to emit a small electrical charge into your brain. It says you won't be able to feel it, but some people get a headache. How much electricity do you think they put through their head? None. How many got headaches? 2/3. Yeah. There's never an all involved. 2/3 by the power of suggestion. But then they had, now there is a very well-known form of nocebo in a false, I could call it a religion. You ever heard of voodoo? Does voodoo work on people who believe in voodoo? People realize they got a curse put on them, they'll be dead the next morning because of the power of suggestion. A lot of that stuff down in the Caribbean. Well, these researchers were doing a placebo study in the country of Italy. And they made a placebo and they told the people, this will help you sleep at night. Nothing in it. Maybe some charcoal or some clay or something, but nothing of any value as far as medicinally. For women, it worked as a placebo. For men, it worked as a nocebo. It didn't work. They could not sleep. What was the problem? The problem's in the picture. You see the problem? It's the color of the placebo. Because it's the same color as the national football team in Italy, and they were doing terrible that year. So the man looked at the thing before bed and thought, oh, the football team is doing terrible. And he lay there stressing about the football team, and he couldn't sleep. Amazing. The law of the mind. Here's one of my favorite stories. Tibor Rubin, he's a little boy there in the lower right-hand corner. I think he was from Poland. This was back in the 1930s. Nazi Germany was rising up. Of course, we know they attacked Poland first. And so they took Tibor and gave him to another group of people who were going to try to flee to Switzerland. They got caught. Matter of fact, the whole family ended up getting incarcerated in this concentration camp. Tibor was taken to Mauthausen concentration camp. This was in the 1930s. He was still alive. He was just a kid. He was still alive in 1945 when they were liberated by the American Army. And he so appreciated what the American Army did for him, giving him his freedom. He vowed, I will pay this country back. I think it's in 1948, he immigrated to America. What happened in 1950 in America? It's called the Korean War. He enlisted in the army because he's going to pay his country back. And he becomes a soldier fighting in Korea. Now, you need to read his story. The things he did were beyond belief. But trouble is, in his chain of command, there was an anti-Semite, a man who hated Jews, his first sergeant. No medal recommendation ever got past the first sergeant. They were canned in the garbage can. One time, he was asked to hold a whole line of defense while the whole battalion escaped. So he had weapons at every position. He'd run from position to position, pull a gun, pull a trigger, throw a hand grenade, back and forth until they were safe, and then he made his escape. But finally, he was captured and put in a communist Chinese prisoner of war camp. Now, he had learned to survive in Mauthausen, but a lot of the Americans, they had what they called, when I was in Medical Cadet Corps in the academy, there was a thing called give-up-itis. Men would just lay down, pull the covers over their head, and die. But he did not want to see this happen. So there's one particular man in there. That's not the man. It's just a picture I found. One man was dying. And so Tibor says, how can I help this man? He had to be creative. So in this prisoner of war compound, the Chinese kept goats. How many of you ever had goats, been around goats, or even deer? You ever seen their feces? Yeah, little round pellets like that. Well, he would collect those, and he would flatten them out a little bit. He'd make it nice and round, sit them in the sun and sun dry those things. And then when he had a bunch of them ready, he'd go into the man and he says, look, I made a deal with one of the guards. I've got the strongest medication that they have in China. If you promise to fight to survive, I will share these with you. Will you promise? Yes, I'll promise. So he gave him a goat droplet. Now, what medicinal value is found in a pellet of goat poop? There'd be some B12, but that wasn't his problem. But he believed this was medication. And he survived. He got well, he survived the war because Tibor learned that the mind has to be convinced to live too. Folks, we got to learn how to do these things. He was presented the Medal of Honor by President Bush, because all the men found out he got nothing for what he did. He received the Medal of Honor. If anyone deserved it, was this man, this man right here. He died, I think, in 2015. But he's a great man. Love the man. Now, how many of you experience a thing called stress? We all experience stress. And it can manifest itself in many ways. We have to understand that symptoms are not the problem. Headache is not the problem. It's what's causing the headache is what we got to eliminate. Let me just step aside from this story. I don't have to tell you where I'm at because I know where I'm at right now. I was working in Userfontein. You don't know where that is. That's way down southern South Africa. We're doing a 3-week detox program. And it was going really great, but one lady, the last week, she stopped coming to classes. I said, where is she? Oh, she's got a headache. I said, well, try this. Next day, it didn't work. I said, well, we'll try this. Kept trying stuff. Finally, they said, nothing's working. I said, bring her to the classroom. Now, this lady had been in bed with a migraine headache for 3 or 4 or 5 days. How many of you have ever had a migraine headache? Apparently, I've had one, because after I did what I did with this lady, I got one when I was in Nash Dome in Ukraine, near Vinica, and I got a migraine headache, first and last one I've ever had, because God was saying, what are you going to do about your own headache? Because here's what I've found. Those of us who practice natural medicine, we practice on everybody else, not ourselves. Not like we're going to go take the drugs. No, we'll just suffer. We'll bite the bullet. So anyway, I had her brought to the classroom. Now, my room was off the classroom, and I had a bathroom off the classroom, and it was a big bathroom. We all went into the bathroom. I sat in a chair in front of the shower. Now, almost everywhere in the world, showers have a wand. It's not they can come out there static, and you got to find, you can sit there and spray any way you want. So I brought it down. I had her sit in the chair and lean her head all the way forward, and I sprayed cold water on the nape of her neck so it dribbled over her head. Now you can do that with 4 gallons of cold water, just pouring it slowly, let it dribble over. Then I sprayed it for about a minute, then I had her sit back, raise her feet, and I sprayed the bottom of her feet, and it was gone. Gone. She was amazed. The people were amazed. I was amazed. When I was in Ukraine, and I was teaching for 3 days with a migraine headache. I know what you're going through. Now I can empathize with you. But I was biting the bullet. I'm going to get rid of this thing without doing treatments. But one day I said, I got to do it. So I go into the treatment area. The treatment area consists of bathtubs in a row with curtains in between. I sat down, I knelt down, turned cold water on, stuck my head underneath the faucet for about a minute, got out, put my feet under it. It was gone. It was gone just like that. Now, headaches can be caused by dehydration, be caused by toxicities, be caused by stress. A number of things can cause it. So headaches, depression, irritable, fatigue, all these signs are signs of stress. So what can we do? Here's some of the things that cause it. We got to know our limits and not to exceed them. People try to stuff too many things into their busy days. You got to learn to say what? No. I can never say no. I'm starting to learn how to say no. But will you do this? Yes, I can do this. And then you work yourself to a frazzle. Don't exceed what you know your limits are. Now, don't set your limits so low that, it's a child's play. Learn to manage your time more effectively. Time is a killer. It just drives us crazy. Those who worry are stressed. Worry is blind and cannot discern the future. I've already given you that quote. That's from the Spirit of Prophecy, too. Here's a woman. She's worrying at 6 o'clock. Where's my husband? She starts coming up with scenarios in her mind. Oh, he's been fired. Now what are we going to do? No money. So, he's lost his cell phone. There's the fired one. And what's going to happen? No, on the way home, the car broke down. Now we don't have a job. The car's broke down. And then he's got a little bit of accident, too. No, it was a big accident. It was a bad accident. My husband is dead. My husband is laying in a morgue somewhere, and I'm going to have to call all the family tonight and tell them that my husband is dead. I'm going to have to plan a funeral. We're going to lose the house. And then her husband walks in the door. 95% of the things that we worry about are never going to happen. Quit worrying. I'm going to say it. How many of you ever saw the magazine Mad? I forget the name of it. Mad. Alfred E. Newman. What was the name of it? Mad Magazine. What was his saying? What? Maybe we need to be a little bit more like Alfred E. Newman. I sort of resemble Alfred E. Newman. When we are stressed, we got to learn to relax. Something as simple as closing the eyes and taking some deep breaths. You realize when you go into the sympathetic nervous system response, what is the sympathetic nervous system response? What's another name for it? Yes, fight or flight. Your adrenals excrete the adrenaline, norepinephrine, and your eyes dilate, and your blood pressure increases, and your heart rate increases, and your hair stands on end, and your blood goes from your skin to your muscles, all for the fight and flight mechanism. The way to stop, and basically, if you're stressed over a bill, it's the same reaction. The way we get rid of that, one of the good ways is taking a deep breath turns on the parasympathetic nervous system. That's why often when we get in a tight situation, we're getting out of it, we always go, whew. That's a physiological reaction. That's something your body's saying, do this to get rid of this stuff that's going on in your body that's going to kill you. Learn to relax. If you can, go out and exercise. That will burn off some of the stress hormones in your body. Very good thing to do. Another thing you can do is look at a thing from a different perspective. All right, let's change the perspective in this picture. See how it changes the whole deal. Gotta wait for you to get done writing because you're going to miss this change. Okay? Change your perspective. Changes the whole thing. Now, I mentioned earlier a man by the name of Mavropoulos. He had a flight from Addis Ababa to Nairobi, Kenya. He was in the United Nations, had a very important talk to do. He got to the airport. He didn't even have any luggage. He ran because he knew it was a short connection. He missed his flight by 2 minutes. They would not let him through. But he didn't realize, and we know, that's the important part, and we know that all things work together for good. He missed his flight. So they booked him for a later flight. As he's standing in line for the later flight, security comes and takes him out of line. Takes him to the security and say, why did you miss your flight this morning? I was there at the gate. Why didn't you have any luggage? All these questions. Why were they asking the questions? Because shortly after that airplane, that Ethiopian airline, you remember this one? 2019? Shortly after it took off, that Antonius Mavropoulos, okay, there's his ticket. That's what the rest of the passengers look like. The plane went straight down in the desert. Killed every single body. How do you think he felt now? I'm sure he still had some stress at that point, realizing I could have been there. But you think he looked at life a little bit differently? Do you think he was thankful that he did not make his flight? Folks, when you miss a flight, when you miss whatever it is, sit there and say, God has something better. I got to tell you a story. I was flying out of Munich back to Atlanta, Georgia, 11-hour flight, and the plane was overbooked, and I'm the last person in line. And I've been gone for a long time. I usually, when I travel, I go for a long time because you get more bang for the buck. We get to the first place saying, did you pack your luggage and all that? Yes, I did. Saying, now we're overbooked. Would you be willing to give up your seat? We'll fly you home tomorrow, and someone else can have your seat. He says, no, I really need to get home. Okay, so we go to the next place. Finally get up to the ticket counter. She says, we're overbooked. Would you be willing to give up your seat? And I says, I don't know. She says, well, we'll give you a $500 voucher. I'll take it. Yes, $500. We can do this. And she says, now I'm going to give you a seating assignment. If we need it, we'll call you at the gate, and we'll pull your luggage. We'll give you a hotel. We'll fly you home tomorrow. I says, good to go. So I'm waiting at the gate, and finally they open the gate. Everyone had a seat. So I go in. I'm in row 23 Bravo, and I'll seat 23rd row. I have a little lunch. They packed me at Bogenhofen. I put it underneath the seat in front of me. This guy on the left, who was sort of blobbing over to my side, he says, you can't have anything underneath there. I say, it's just some food. Stewardess, this guy's got something underneath the seat. Now, everyone's looking at me like I'm the Unabomber, and I'm very easily embarrassed. And she says, it's okay, sir. I says, whew, this is going to be a long 11 hours. So I'm sitting there, people still come up. Then a guy comes up and he stops next to me and he says, you're in my seat. I says, no, I'm in 23 Bravo. He says, I'm in 23 Bravo. You know what? He was. I thought, now I'm going to have this grumpy guy next to me, this grumpy guy sitting on my lap all the way to Atlanta. But he's mad. So he starts swimming upstream. He grabs a stewardess by physical force, drags her back and says, this guy's in my seat. Now everyone's looking at me, the Unabomber again, this seat stealer. And she says, sir, may I see your seating assignment? I said, sure. And I gave it to her. And she looks at it and she says, you'll have to come with me. Now, at this point, I've got a choice. I say, hey, buckled. I was here first. I'm going to stay here because it was an emergency exit row. Pretty cool, wasn't it? But I didn't do that. Click. I say, do I have to take my carry-on with me? Because you know when you're flying, you want to make sure you get a place for your carry-on. Because some people put the whole suitcase up there. I just had a little thing. She said, just come with me. So I left it there. She goes up to where that place where the stewardess do their things. I walked in and she handed it back to me. But she crossed out 23B and put 6G. You ever been there? That's up in business class with these great big seats. So I walk up, it's like I'm in a dream. It's on the other side of the airplane. And this guy's sitting there in the aisle seat, and I'm in the window seat. They don't have to sit there and do all this stuff and contortions, just walk on in. I sit down, there's 3 buttons on my armrest. So I push one button, my legs go up. Oh, that's cool. Down. Another one, lumbar support. Yeah. Another one, it goes back. So I'm sitting there playing with all this stuff, and this guy's sitting there looking at me like, oh, who's next to me now? Now, I said, please, sir, forgive me. I've never been in first class. I think it was first class. He said, I don't know how to act. And he says, that's okay. He says, but that thing, that's yours. They have this packet of stuff, which is wonderful. And and all the stewardess, every time they looked at me, they were smiling because they knew what happened. Because I was positive. I know that God has something better. God takes nothing away, but that he gives us something better. So we take off. We're flying, and the stewardess comes up and he says, sir, would you like to, it's time to eat. And I said, well, I've ordered a vegetarian meal. She said, wouldn't you like to see our menu? I said, you got a menu up here? And she hands me the menu. It's pretty thick. It's almost all a wine list. In the back, there's an exotic dead bird, an exotic dead fish, and some type of an exotic animal. So she comes by and she says, well, have you made up your mind? I says, ma'am, I'm still a vegetarian. She says, well, I'll give you what goes with it. A big salad, hard rolls, sorbet and sparkling water. Had a wonderful time. Then she says, sir, would you like a video machine? This is before he had the things in the back of the thing. I says, you got a video machine? What do you got? She handed me a book of movies. I went through the whole thing. She came back and says, nothing I'm going to watch. I just enjoyed the whole trip. The best part was when we finally landed in Atlanta, I couldn't go back until the people passed. And there comes 23A and 23B, and I'm sitting up there in first class. God loves us, and he takes care of us. I get so many stories about this, and it's sort of gallows humor. It's not really gallows humor. They landed in a bad place, but Antonius Mavropoulos, even today, has got to be thanking God. I hope he believes in him because he spared his life. What is God's favorite name for himself? I mentioned it this morning. Moses says, who shall I say sent me? I am. I am is his favorite name for himself. His favorite name is not I will be. He's not the God of tomorrow. His favorite name is not I was. He's not the God of yesterday. He's the God of today. We have one day. Today is the only day that we've got to deal with, and the I am is in this day with us. We need to learn to take him at his word. Stress, we need to learn to think positively, which we've already talked about. We need to learn to eat healthfully. Our health, what we eat controls our health. Poor health causes stress. We need to take care of ourselves physically. We need to have a support group. In Japan, they have a term called ikigai. Ikigai basically means a purpose of life. You'll find that the old people like to get together every day and just talk. They're sociable people, wonderful people. I lived in Okinawa for a while. Another thing is we've got to learn to be organized. You ever walked into a disorganized place? Does it feel stressful? As soon as I walk in my front door, I feel stressed. But if you straighten it up, everything gets a little bit different. If it's been raining and there's a puddle, what's a child going to do with that puddle? They're going to go right on through it. We need to be more like children. Maybe we need to walk through a few more puddles ourselves, because it's all about the law of the mind. There is a form of therapy in Japan called Shinrin-yoku. Shinrin-yoku means basically taking in the atmosphere of the forest. How many have been to Japan? Okay. It's all mountains going through the spine of it. And they're covered with trees, evergreen trees. Do you realize that evergreen trees emit negative air ions, which are good for us? And they have a therapy. They'll take people who are depressed and stressed up into the forest as a treatment, Shinrin-yoku. You're interesting, look at the first two characters in there. What are those? The first two characters, first character is made up of 3 parts. Second character is made up of 2 parts. They're the same part. What does it look like to you? They're trees. It's a picture of a tree. You got the tree and you got the root system. It's counterintuitive. When you finally understand how to crack the code, it's interesting. You may not know the Japanese word, but you can read what it's saying. Shinrin-yoku. When you're feeling stressed and you feel like crying, cry. Stress hormones are found in tears. When my sister died, I went to her daughter's house, my niece Dawn, and I say, I got to cry. I got to leave. And I just went out, but I put it off so long I couldn't cry. When we feel like crying, cry. Guys, men, women, cry. It's good for us. Good for us. And of course, pray. Now, we've all got stressors in our lives. Some of us are overwhelmed with the workload that we have to do. Some of us, it's the boss that we have to deal with. When I was stationed in Hawaii, I worked for a lieutenant general, and the chief of staff and the staff secretary just drove me crazy. That can be very stressful. It was a very stressful 3 years for me. Time can be very stressful. But I have had one stressor in my life above all others that stressed me to pieces, and that was that bird. The whippoorwill. I lived out in a farm in Missouri. Beautiful daytime. I love to hear birds sing. They don't sing in the daytime. You'd have all the other beautiful birds, but at nighttime, when it started getting dark, the day birds stopped. Still didn't hear anything. When I turned out the light, as soon as I turned out the light, it seems like the bird woke up. And the bird started to sing. Now, I'm going to try to let you hear. It drove me crazy. I looked up on the internet, how many times does a whippoorwill do that before it takes a good breath? 1,088 times. I was totally stressed out about that bird. Now, I told you I was in the Marine Corps. I'm a very good shot. And you can't miss many things. That was me in the Marine Corps in Southeast Asia. You can't miss much with a double-barrel shotgun. But I missed that bird. It's dark out there. Shoot up the truck, shoot the dog, shoot everything else in the world, but you can't get that lousy bird. And every day, I couldn't sleep at night. I was grumpy all day until I got the mail. If you live on the farm in Missouri, you get a magazine called the Missouri Conservationist. And it had an article about the whippoorwill in that magazine. And I thought, oh, it's going to tell me how to catch and kill that bird. And but it didn't. It told me what that bird's favorite food was. And that favorite food is my most mortal enemy, and that is the mosquito. How many of you love to hear a mosquito at night? Hate that sound. That will stress me more than anything else. And when I read that that bird will eat more mosquitoes in one night than a purple martin will eat in a lifetime, that bird never bothered me again. Matter of fact, I love to hear that bird today. What changed? I changed. My attitude changed. If we can change our attitude about our stressors, we're going to get rid of that problem. It's all about choices. We all have, that old country western song, right or left at right or left at Oak Street. It's a choice I make every day. We need to make the choice every day. I'm going to be happy in the Lord. I'm going to praise God for whatever goes wrong, because whatever goes wrong, God is allowing it to happen to test you, to prove you, or to give you something better. And that's what my experience has been. So those two laws that we looked at, the law of an innocence or a clear conscience, and the law of happiness or attitude, to me are the most important laws outside of trusting in God in the whole 15 laws of health. And you don't find them in the 8 laws of health. Any questions? I think we're supposed to end at 5 o'clock, and that's just what it is. Any questions? Wow. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing simple remedies. You can learn, and as I mentioned this morning, as I mentioned last night, when that man, that Amish guy says, you've got to be transported, he says, I'll die at home. From me to a member of the church, to the man's daughter, and the guy was completely well in a week. Just doing simple remedies. You can learn how to do it tomorrow. I'll show more slides about some of the most amazing things you've ever seen that I've had to deal with in my life traveling around the world. And so go home and get a good night of rest. And we will see you. Okay, Pat, you're going to come up?